this video, we're going to be taking a look at a 3-minute game that I played versus the Budapest Gambit. So let's go ahead and get right into this. And the Budapest is an opening that I would classify as good as a surprise weapon, especially if you feel that your opponent is not up on theory. But hopefully, if you are looking at this video for ideas for white, I'm going to give you a few ideas here on how to handle the Budapest. And you got to accept gambits to refute them. Let's go ahead and do it. D takes e5, and there's two major lines of the Budapest with knight e4, knight g4. Knight g4 is by far more popular, and we're going to go with that one this game. So after knight g4, the line that I typically play here is knight h3, and after knight takes e5, we go e3. And if you're wondering why we have this knight on the edge of the board, it becomes clear once we get to this position. And this pawn structure, I feel, is fundamentally bad for black, because where are the standard breaks? Well, your standard break is typically c6, d5. How can you get c6, d5 in when I can simply go rook d1 to challenge the d-pawn? And at the same time, d5 belongs to white, without question, with the c-pawn, queen, and both knights eyeing d5. So you can slow and steady press with this position, and when you look at this position in the database, white scores upwards of 70% win. So this knight h3 is what I normally play, but after knight g4, I was feeling about just, I want a position. I just want a solid game. And some offbeat openings, you can treat them in this way and just get a position and look to outplay your opponent from having the slightly better pawn structure. And that's what I would recommend for the people who aren't into studying theory or non-theoretical. Don't be intimidated by the Budapest. Just play a solid game. Get the slightly better position. So we'll go knight f3 to defend the e-pawn. And now in some way, black's going to need to try to get compensation for the center pawn. So the main line typically goes bishop c5. Well, he's threatening f2. That's a big threat. Let's stop that. Knight c6, looking to get his pawn back. I don't care. We'll give it back. Castle, give it back on our terms. Knight c3, takes, knight e5. We end up getting the same kind of position. If we were to take on e5, like we'll see in the main game, and I'm going to show you in a moment, rook e8, b3, and I want you to get a snapshot of this plan and structure. a5, knight a4, bishop f8, bishop b2, white's developed. We put our knight back there because that's where it needs to be. We go queen d2 to be flexible. Maybe we're going to go rook a1, keep an eye on that weak d6 pawn. It's not going anywhere. Black played queen h4 and f4, one of the standard plans in this position to start pressing. And this is following Giri Mamedov from 2018, where Giri went on to win. And the plans are pretty straightforward for white. Black, on the other hand, I feel is posturing aggression rather than actually having aggressive intent. So let's look at the main game. Knight c6 was played, and we're going to get a position very, very similar to what was seen. And we've got a rough transposition. I believe it's very close. Giri played knight a4 after a5. Well, we both castled, and my opponent played bishop f5. So here is where I feel like if anything should have been played to f5, it's probably the f-pawn, so black can go all out attacking and try to open up the f-file. So after bishop f5, I felt very comfortable that I was already going to have an easy game. So if your opponent makes a move which doesn't indicate a plan like bishop f5, and you can make a move that you need anyway to improve your position, go ahead and do it. So I know that one of the typical moves in this position is to play f4 and gradually press in the center. But with my king on g1 lined up with this bishop on c5, that's not good. And then the e3 pawn being weak, that's also not good. So I do a multi-purpose move here. Queen d2. I'm watching that e3 pawn. I'm connecting my rooks, finishing development. And I'm also looking at the potential of playing rook a to d1. The only open file is under white's control. So let's go ahead and magnify that strength in the position. My opponent plays another move, h6. It's solid. Like, okay, king h1. Now I'm very clearly prepared to play f4, e4, and start aggressive intention on the king side now, following the same idea that I'd seen in that Geary game, which is why I showed it to you. So c6, I can't help but keep an eye on that d6 pawn, and here my opponent, who's roughly 2250 Lichess rating, falls apart completely after queen b6, and already I think the engine probably has it +3, +4 for white. So why? If you're a pause your video and figure it out type of person, now's the time. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, keeping it going. I played knight a4, bothering that queen and bishop. And after queen b4, bishop c3, continuing to bother the lady. And only now do I clip the bishop and win the pawn. And now, what I found interesting about this game from this point on is some of the mistakes that I made. I know the bishop pair is winning here. Having the extra pawn beside the point, the bishop pair is monster. Just monsters in this type of position. So, as you've seen a few times on the channel, I try to emphasize these middle games / end games and these imbalances. So let's go forward and focus on them a bit. Well, first of all, I'm making a threat on the knight, so he needs to do something about that. And this is already a critical moment, and I believe because I had won a pawn and had the bishop pair, knew that I was winning, I relaxed. And some players play better when they're relaxed, some players play better when they're tense and grinding. I'm definitely in the latter category. So when I relax, I typically don't play the best types of moves. And I wish I could have this next move back, f3. And f3, it's not that it's a bad move. It prepares e4, and I'm gradually getting this Maroczy bind type structure position. But logically, it's not the best way to go because I'm giving f3, e4 is going to give another entry point for that knight on g6. So it's not very useful. The best move, according to the engine, is the active move, g4. Now, after bishop c8, rook fd1, comparing this to the main game, white has everything that he wants. Black has undeveloped to c8, and everybody's working. And after a4, black's trying to get activity. No, we shut the door on that. And then after a3, we can gradually improve the position without any real threat or worry here. And this is what you're looking for. My opponent definitely found more counter chances in the main game. After knight g6, f3, rook a8, I'm okay with trading a set of rooks off. I still have dominance over the d file. And a4 I felt was a good practical move. The engine's okay with playing b takes a4, ruining the structure, and it deems it as best, but I felt that keeping the a file closed would be more accurate. And a3 is a good move because I'll play it if you don't, and I'll secure my structure. Now I have to watch out for, say, bishop b1, going after that a pawn and giving problems. So I'm going to go ahead and play e4. And then, as I stated before, a problem with e4 is the weakening, the space left behind on f4. So I'm taking that away. g3, and we're going to see this theme pretty much the rest of the game at key moments, is trying to dominate this knight. And bishops have the ability to do this. After rook e8, f4, with the understandable threat of f5. So bishop h3, he's hitting my e-pawn, so I gain some space there. King g1, I don't like being in the corner. Kings need to be active in endings. Rook d3, and this is a flexible move. One, keeping the knight out of e3, d4, watching key squares. And 2, I have a single-minded focus of going after this a3 pawn because I don't like it. Knight e7. And it's interesting when you hit on a plan and you know it 100% works because I'm only thinking about the pawn. I didn't think about another plan here that I had at my disposal. Did you see it? This is another one of those pause moments if you didn't find it already. And did you find it? Because it's a big hint. There's not many ideas of the position. Yeah, if you found g4, that's definitely going to snag the b. And after rook e3, that's all she wrote. But as I said, I have this single-minded focus on grabbing the a-pawn, so bishop d2, and then bishop c1, I'm getting the pawn, but again, g4. Single-minded focus. My opponent's doing what he can to distract me and flail. And rook takes. And now we get to the next phase of the game, which is the bishops versus the knight and bishop. And the extra pawns help, but still, technique is important because you can pitch these games. Knight c6. Put the bishop on a square where it takes away all forward squares of the knight. After king f8, start bringing the king in. a3. And this is to provide the b4 square as a potential anchor for the bishop if need be. Bishop f3, eyeing the knight on c6. I'm not interested in capturing, 1, because it would give up the bishop pair, and 2, it would enter a bishop of opposite color endings, which would make it harder to win. So knight e7, bishop e4, bothering the knight. Now, I'm happy to trade off bishops here, but I want to trade on my terms. I want him to take me, so then I have a pass d-pawn, which should make it very easy to win the game. My opponent, to his credit, plays h5. I bother the g-pawn, and then go right back. And I think that's a mistake that a lot of players make, is they're scared to waste time in every phase of the game, because if you waste time in the opening, you very well may lose quickly if you play very aggressive openings. If you waste time in the middle game, you're worse. But if you waste time in endgame, sometimes it can be a tempo-giving move, and it gives your opponent more chances to go wrong, and they pitch the game for you. So don't be afraid in endings to do these types of stutter steps to push the game along. My opponent plays this aggressive move, h4, and I decided to go ahead and liquidate the position with bishop takes e6, but I do like the computer's answer better with the immediate g4, check, and f5. A move I definitely wouldn't have considered, this pawn sack idea. Takes with g5, forcing the knight backwards, and then the engine's like, okay, a4. The f-pawns are doubled, the h-pawn is weak, black's knight is completely out of the game and paralyzed. This is why engines play better chess than people. But we'll see the human technique now. Bishop takes e6, g4, and we miss things. After h3, knight takes g4. And this is an instructive moment, and this is another reason why I really like this game, because I spent 8 seconds here. And 4 of those seconds was me going, well, how did I miss this line? You shake it off, and you only think about the position moving forward, the current position. If you dwell on previous mistakes, they come in threes. So if you freak out here and just take the knight, black wins the game. But if you logically think, well, he just took a pawn. I've still got 5, and he still has 4. And I can still attack one of his because it's on a dark square and it's not going anywhere. You find bishop e1, and all you did was trade a pawn when he took on g4. So, blunder? Not really. Knight f5, and again, bishop f2. Notice how the bishop dominates the forward squares of the knight. Very important concept in these endgames. King c6, a4, getting the pawn in agreement with the bishop, because I am going to, at a key moment, need to trade either my c or a pawn for the b pawn. And getting them closer is naturally going to improve. b6, now I'm getting my king around to a better square. Knight f7, and he wants to play g5 to undermine the e-pawn. So I simply play h4. And he starts coming back. Now this is a key moment as well. We need to push either the c or a pawn to make progress. Which one do you push and why? Okay, so this was another pause moment, if you like. So the better of the two pawn pushes is the c pawn, because it's harder for knights to deal with rook pawns, and the outside pass pawn will distract the king and or the knight, so our king can go to the other side of the board and clean up. If we were to push the a pawn, his king is directly in front of the path of the c pawn, and there's no way for us to push it forward. So that's why c5 is more accurate. And notice as soon as the knight comes to f5, back to f2 we go. Again, not only defending the h-pawn, but dominating the knight. And after knight e7, a5, I wasn't so concerned with the f-pawn, because I knew in the event that he captured, as he's worrying about the a-pawn, my king's going to walk around and start collecting, and the outside h-pawn or the e-pawn should win the game. Knight c7, bishop b6, and I start the path of the king. And I like this moment because after knight b8, I see that he's mostly repeating, so when he goes knight a6, bishop d6, and now we see absolute full domination of the knight. The knight cannot move at all, so he is out of the game. And after king f3, my opponent forfeited on time, but it's clear that the h-pawn is a runner, and it's a girl in a few moves, and it's a win. So hopefully, start to finish, you got some interesting ideas in the Budapest Gambit, and some minor piece imbalances in this one. So, hopefully you enjoyed it.